Sarah Martinez stepped out of the black SUV at the Norfolk Naval Base, her combat boots hitting the asphalt with quiet confidence. The September morning air carried the salt smell of the ocean mixed with diesel fuel from the ships docked nearby. She adjusted her tactical gear bag on her shoulder and walked toward the building that would change everything she thought she knew about herself. At 26, Sarah had already spent 8 years in the Navy. She started as a communications specialist, then moved to intelligence work, and, finally, found herself selected for something that made her heart race with both excitement and terror. The letter in her pocket still felt surreal. She had been chosen to participate in a joint training exercise with SEAL Team 7. The other sailors walking around the base gave her curious looks. Most had never seen a woman carrying gear toward the Special Operations building. Sarah kept her eyes forward and her shoulders straight. She had learned long ago that showing any sign of doubt or nervousness only invited more questions and skeptical stares. Inside the building, she found herself in a briefing room with 12 men. They were all older than her, bigger than her, and clearly not expecting her arrival. The room fell silent when she walked in. Conversations about weekend plans and upcoming exercises died instantly. "You lost, sweetheart?" asked a tall man with arms covered in tattoos. His tone was not mean, but it carried the assumption that she had wandered into the wrong place. Several of the other men chuckled softly. "Petty Officer Second Class Martinez reporting for the joint training exercise," Sarah said clearly. She pulled out her orders and held them steady, even though her hands wanted to shake. The tattooed man, who she learned was called Murphy, looked confused. "There must be some mistake. This is SEAL training prep. We're not expecting any communications support today." "I'm not here for communications support," Sarah replied. "I'm here as a participant." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. She heard someone whisper, "No way, they're serious about this." Another voice said, "She'll wash out in the first hour." Sarah had heard it all before. When she first enlisted, drill instructors told her she was too small. When she applied for intelligence training, classmates said she would never handle the pressure. When she volunteered for advanced combat training, even her friends questioned whether she could keep up with the men. But Sarah had something that went deeper than muscle mass or height. She had grown up as the youngest of 5 children in a family where her father worked construction and her mother managed a warehouse. From the time she could walk, she had to fight for everything. Food at the dinner table, time in the bathroom, attention from tired parents, and respect from older brothers who thought little sisters were just obstacles. Her childhood was not filled with dance classes or piano lessons. Instead, she spent afternoons helping her father fix broken equipment and evenings helping her mother organize inventory shipments. She learned to use tools before she learned to use makeup. She understood how machines worked before she understood how social groups worked. When other girls in high school worried about prom dates, Sarah worried about college scholarships. She knew her family could not afford to send her anywhere, so she needed perfect grades and perfect test scores. She spent lunch periods in the library instead of the cafeteria. She worked weekends at an auto repair shop instead of hanging out at the mall. The Navy recruiter who came to her school saw something in Sarah that she was still discovering herself. He talked about opportunities to see the world, learn technical skills, and serve something bigger than herself. He also mentioned educational benefits that would let her attend college without drowning in debt. Sarah enlisted 2 weeks after graduation. Basic training was hard, but not harder than growing up in her house. The physical challenges were tough, but she had been lifting heavy boxes and carrying tools since she was 10. The mental pressure was intense, but she had already learned to focus under stress when helping her mother meet warehouse deadlines. What surprised everyone, including Sarah herself, was how naturally military life fit her. The structure made sense. The clear expectations felt comfortable. The emphasis on teamwork and mission accomplishment matched values she had learned at home. During her first assignment aboard a destroyer, Sarah discovered she had an unusual ability to stay calm during emergencies. When equipment failed during storms, while other sailors panicked, Sarah methodically worked through troubleshooting procedures. When communication systems went down during exercises, she found creative solutions that kept operations running.
Her commanding officers noticed.
They recommended her for advanced training. They suggested she apply for intelligence specialist school. When she excelled there, they encouraged her to volunteer for assignments that would challenge her even more. The path that led her to this briefing room started with a simple conversation 6 months earlier. Sarah was working late in the intelligence center, analyzing satellite photos, when Commander Patricia Hayes walked over to her workstation. Commander Hayes was a legend in the Navy. She had been one of the first women to serve on submarines and had earned respect through 15 years of exceptional service. She was known for being direct, fair, and absolutely demanding of excellence. "Martinez, walk with me," Commander Hayes had said that evening. They went out onto the ship's deck. The ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, and stars filled the sky in a way that never got old for Sarah. Commander Hayes leaned against the railing and studied Sarah carefully. "How do you feel about challenges?" she asked.
"I like them, ma'am. They help me figure out what I'm really capable of."
"What about challenges that other people think are impossible?"
Sarah thought about that question. "I guess I'd want to know why they think it's impossible. Sometimes people assume things are impossible because they've never seen them done before."
Commander Hayes smiled. "The Navy is starting to open more opportunities for women in special operations support roles. Not combat positions, but critical support that requires the same training and standards."
"It's controversial. Many people think women can't handle it. Others think it's necessary for mission success. What do you think, ma'am?" "I think the right woman, with the right preparation and the right mindset, could prove a lot of people wrong.
I also think it would be the hardest thing she ever attempted."
Commander Hayes pulled out a folder. "There's an opportunity coming up.
Joint training exercise with SEAL Team 7. They need someone with your intelligence background and language skills for a simulated operation.
The training would be identical to what their operators go through. Same standards, same expectations, same evaluation criteria."
Sarah felt her heart start beating faster.
"And if I can't keep up?"
"Then, you wash out, just like anyone else who can't meet the standards. No special treatment, no lowered expectations. You succeed or fail based entirely on your performance."
Sarah looked out at the ocean.
Every major decision in her life had involved choosing the harder path. Staying in school instead of dropping out to work full-time.
Enlisting instead of taking a safe job in her hometown. Volunteering for challenging assignments instead of coasting in comfortable positions.
"I want to try," she said. Now, sitting in this briefing room with 12 skeptical SEALs, Sarah remembered that conversation. Commander Hayes had been right about one thing. This was going to be harder than anything she had ever attempted. The door opened and a man walked in who immediately changed the energy in the room. He was not the biggest person there, but everyone sat up straighter when he entered. His presence filled the space in a way that had nothing to do with physical size and everything to do with quiet authority.
"Good morning. I'm Lieutenant Commander James Mitchell, and I'll be running this exercise."
His voice was calm and measured. His eyes moved around the room, making brief contact with each person. When his gaze reached Sarah, it did not linger or show surprise. He simply nodded and moved on.
"Over the next 3 weeks, we'll be conducting a simulated rescue operation in urban terrain. The scenario involves extracting high-value intelligence assets from a hostile environment. You'll work in 3 teams of 4, rotating through different roles and responsibilities."
He walked to a large map mounted on the wall. The training area includes buildings, vehicles, civilian actors, and obstacles designed to replicate real-world conditions. Success requires perfect coordination, creative problem-solving, and absolute trust in your teammates. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell turned back to face the room. "I know some of you have questions about team composition. Let me be clear about something. Everyone in this room has been selected based on specific qualifications. Everyone here has demonstrated competence in their field. Everyone here will be evaluated by identical standards." His eyes found Sarah again, but this time his look was different. It was the look of someone who knew exactly what was happening and was prepared to deal with any challenges that arose. Physical fitness, technical skills, decision-making under pressure, and teamwork will all be tested.
Some of you will discover capabilities you didn't know you had. Others will discover limitations you need to work on.
Both discoveries are valuable.
Sarah felt something shift in her chest. For the first time since entering the building, she felt like someone saw her as a sailor first and a woman second. Any questions about the mission parameters? Lieutenant Commander Mitchell asked.
Murphy raised his hand.
Sir, just to clarify, everyone participates in all aspects of the training?
That's correct.
No modified standards, no alternative tracks. Everyone does everything. Including the physical challenges?
Especially the physical challenges.
Sarah watched the faces around her. Some looked skeptical. Others looked curious.
A few looked like they were already calculating whether she would make it through the first day. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell distributed thick folders to each person.
Training schedule, equipment list, and background briefings. We start tomorrow at 0500. Dismissed.
As people filed out of the room, Sarah heard fragments of conversations.
Someone mentioned betting pools about how long she would last. Another voice wondered if the training would be modified to accommodate her.
A third person asked if this was just some kind of publicity stunt. Sarah gathered her materials and started toward the door.
Lieutenant Commander Mitchell called her name. Martinez, a word.
She walked over to his desk, wondering if he was going to give her some kind of special instructions or warnings about what she was getting into.
Yes, sir? I've read your file.
Intelligence Specialist, Advanced Combat Training, Commendations for Performance Under Pressure.
Impressive record. Thank you, sir. I've also heard the talk outside this room. People have opinions about whether you belong here.
He leaned back in his chair.
What's your opinion? Sarah thought about her answer carefully. She could say she was confident and ready.
She could say she understood the challenges ahead. She could say she was grateful for the opportunity. Instead, she told him the truth. I don't know if I belong here yet, sir.
I know I'm qualified on paper. I know I want the chance to find out what I'm capable of. I know I won't quit just because something is difficult. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell nodded slowly. Fair answer. Here's what I know. This training will test every limit you have. It will push you past what you think is possible. Some days you'll question why you volunteered. Some days your teammates will question it too.
He stood up and walked around the desk. I also know that the best operators I've worked with share certain characteristics.
They don't give up when things get complicated.
They focus on solutions instead of problems. They earn respect through performance, not words.
Sarah met his eyes. I understand, sir. I hope you do.
Because starting tomorrow, nobody cares about your gender, your background, or what anyone thinks you can or can't do. They only care about whether you can do the job when it matters.
Sarah left the building with her mind racing. She drove back to her barracks, thinking about the weeks ahead.
Part of her was terrified.
The physical demands would be extreme. The mental pressure would be constant. The scrutiny would be intense.
But another part of her was excited in a way she had never experienced. This was her chance to find out what she was really made of. Not as a woman in the Navy, but as a sailor who happened to be a woman. The difference was important. That evening, she called her mother.
How was your day, honey? I'm about to start the hardest training of my life.
Her mother was quiet for a moment.
Are you ready? Sarah looked at herself in the mirror across the room.
She saw a young woman who had worked for everything she had achieved. Someone who had never been given anything because of her gender and had never been excused from anything because of it either.
I'm about to find out. The next morning would bring challenges she could not imagine.
But, tonight, Sarah Martinez felt something she had been searching for her entire military career. She felt like she was exactly where she belonged, about to discover exactly who she could become. The alarm screamed at 0445, but Sarah was already awake. She had been lying in her bunk for the past hour, watching the clock and running through mental preparations. Her stomach felt tight with nervous energy, but her mind was clear and focused. She arrived at the training facility 15 minutes early, fully dressed in combat gear and carrying her equipment pack. The parking lot was empty except for one other vehicle. As she walked toward the building, she saw Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's truck and realized he was already inside preparing for the day. The other trainees began arriving at 0455. Sarah watched them from her position near the entrance, noting how they moved and interacted. These were not ordinary sailors. Every man who walked through that door carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from years of specialized training and proven performance under pressure. Murphy nodded to her as he passed.
"Morning, Martinez. Ready for some fun?"
His tone was neutral, neither encouraging nor dismissive. Sarah appreciated that he was treating her like any other team member, at least for now.
At exactly 0500, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell appeared in the doorway. "Fall in."
They formed a line in the corridor, standing at attention while he reviewed his clipboard. The building felt different in the early morning darkness. Overhead lights cast harsh shadows, and the smell of cleaning chemicals mixed with the scent of worn equipment and leather gear.
Today we start with baseline assessments. Physical fitness, weapons proficiency, and navigation skills.
The purpose is to establish where everyone stands before we begin team exercises. He looked up from his clipboard.
These are not pass-fail evaluations.
They're measurements that will help determine training focus areas and team assignments.
Sarah felt some relief.
She had been worried that the first day would be an elimination round designed to weed out anyone who could not immediately perform at elite levels.
First event is a conditioning circuit. 2-mile run, obstacle course, then strength challenges. Standard SEAL preparation protocol. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell handed out course maps. Time limit is 45 minutes. Questions? No one spoke. Move out.
They jogged as a group to the outdoor training area. Sarah fell into position in the middle of the pack, neither leading nor trailing. She had learned in previous training that starting too fast often led to problems later, especially during long events. The running course wound through wooded trails behind the base. Sarah found a comfortable pace that matched the group average. Her breathing was steady and her legs felt strong. Running had always been one of her better physical skills, developed through years of morning runs during her off-duty hours. About halfway through the first mile, she noticed that some of the larger men were beginning to show signs of strain. One was breathing heavily. Another had sweat streaming down his face despite the cool morning air. Sarah realized that being bigger and stronger did not automatically translate to better endurance. Murphy was running beside her, maintaining easy conversation pace.
"You run much?" "Most mornings when I'm not on duty." "Smart. Running saves you in this kind of training. Strength matters, but endurance matters more."
They finished the 2 miles in just under 15 minutes. Sarah was breathing hard but felt like she could continue. More importantly, she was in the front half of the group when they reached the obstacle course. The course consisted of walls to climb, ropes to traverse, tunnels to crawl through, and heavy objects to carry.
Sarah attacked each obstacle methodically, focusing on technique rather than speed.
She had learned from watching other people that rushing usually led to mistakes that cost more time than they saved. At the first wall, which stood 8 feet high, she watched the approach used by the man ahead of her. He took 3 running steps, jumped up to grab the top edge, and pulled himself over in one smooth motion. Sarah tried the same technique but could not quite reach the top edge from her jump.
She stepped back and reconsidered.
Instead of trying to jump higher, she looked for footholds in the wooden surface. She found a small gap between boards that allowed her to step up 6 inches, then jumped from that position to grab the top. The technique took a few extra seconds, but it worked.
Good adaptation, said a voice behind her.
She turned to see Lieutenant Commander Mitchell following the group through the course, making notes on his clipboard. The rope traverse required her to hang from a thick rope and pull herself hand over hand across a 20-foot gap. Her arms started burning halfway across, but she forced herself to maintain steady progress. When she reached the other side, her forearms felt like they were on fire, but she had made it without falling. The tunnel crawl was actually easier for her than for some of the larger men. Her smaller frame allowed her to move through the low space without getting stuck or having to contort her body into uncomfortable positions. She emerged from the far end with mud on her uniform but feeling confident. The final obstacle involved carrying a 60-pound sandbag up a steep hill and back down. Sarah lifted the bag and immediately knew this would be her biggest challenge. The weight was manageable, but carrying it up an inclined trail while maintaining good time would push her limits. She settled the bag across her shoulders in a fireman's carry position and started up the hill. Her legs burned with each step. Halfway up, she had to stop and readjust the bag's position. She could hear other trainees passing her on both sides. "Come on, Martinez," Murphy called as he jogged past with his sandbag.
"Don't let that thing beat you."
Sarah gritted her teeth and pushed harder. She made it to the top of the hill in the bottom third of the group, but she made it. The trip back down was easier, and she managed to pass two people who had started faster but were now struggling with fatigue.
When she crossed the finish line, Sarah checked her watch. 38 minutes total.
Not the best time in the group, but well within the 45-minute limit.
Lieutenant Commander Mitchell gathered everyone in a circle.
"Good work.
Time to move to weapons proficiency testing."
They walked to an indoor shooting range where tables held disassembled rifles, pistols, and equipment Sarah did not recognize.
Lieutenant Commander Mitchell explained the exercise. Each station tests a different skill. Rifle assembly and disassembly under time pressure. Pistol accuracy at multiple distances.
Equipment identification and function. Work through all three stations. Take your time and focus on accuracy over speed.
Sarah moved to the rifle station first.
She had qualified as an expert marksman during basic training and had maintained her skills through regular practice. The rifle in front of her was a newer model than what she normally used, but the basic principles were the same. She picked up the pieces and began assembly, working from memory and muscle recognition.
The trigger group slid into place with a satisfying click. The bolt carrier assembly aligned perfectly on the first try.
The charging handle seated correctly without forcing. "Time," called the instructor running the station. Sarah looked up, surprised. She had been so focused on the mechanical process that she had not been tracking time.
2 minutes, 40 seconds.
"Good work." At the pistol station, she fired groups of shots at targets positioned at 15, 25, and 50 yards. Her groups were tight and well-centered. Years of practice had taught her to control breathing, squeeze the trigger smoothly, and follow through on each shot.
The equipment identification station proved more challenging.
She was presented with various tools, communication devices, and specialized gear. Some items she recognized from her intelligence work. Others were completely unfamiliar.
"Best guess on anything you're not sure about," the instructor told her.
"This tests your ability to learn quickly and make educated assessments." Sarah worked through the tables systematically, identifying what she knew for certain and making logical guesses about unfamiliar items based on their design and apparent function. When she finished, the instructor smiled.
85% correct. That's better than most people do on their first time through. The final event of the day was navigation testing.
Each trainee received a map, compass, and grid coordinates for 5 different locations scattered across the base. The challenge was to find all 5 points and return to the starting location within 2 hours.
Sarah studied the map carefully before starting.
She plotted all 5 points and planned an efficient route that would minimize backtracking. Navigation had been part of her intelligence training, and she felt confident in her map reading skills.
The first 3 points were relatively easy to find. They were located near obvious landmarks like buildings or roads. The fourth point was more challenging, positioned in a wooded area with few distinguishing features. Sarah had to use her compass and pace counting to triangulate the exact location. The fifth point proved most difficult. According to her map, it should have been located near a water tower behind the maintenance buildings. When she arrived at the calculated position, she found only an empty field. Sarah rechecked her calculations and realized she had made an error in converting grid coordinates to map references. She corrected the mistake and found the actual location about 200 yards from where she had initially searched. The checkpoint flag was tied to a fence post in an area she would have walked right past if she had not double-checked her work. Sarah returned to the starting point with 20 minutes to spare. She was tired but satisfied with her performance. More importantly, she felt like she had learned something about her own capabilities and limitations. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell called the group together for final debrief. Today's results will help determine team assignments for next week's exercises. Everyone performed within acceptable parameters. Some standout performances in individual events, but remember that special operations success depends on team performance, not individual achievement. He looked around the circle, making eye contact with each person. Tomorrow we start working together. Today was about measuring individual capabilities. From now on, everything we do emphasizes teamwork, communication, and mutual support. As the group dispersed, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic. She had not been the fastest runner or the strongest person on the obstacle course, but she had completed every challenge and performed well in areas that matched her background and training. Murphy walked beside her toward the parking lot. "How do you feel about today?" "Tired but good. I learned some things about what I need to work on." "That's the right attitude. Today was easy compared to what's coming next week." He paused at his truck. "For what it's worth, you did better than I expected." "Not because you're a woman, but because most people struggle more on their first day with this level of training." Sarah appreciated his honesty. "What should I expect from the team exercises?" "Everything gets harder when you have to coordinate with other people. Communication breaks down. People make mistakes that affect everyone else. Stress levels go way up." Murphy opened his truck door. "But that's also when you find out who you really want on your team when things go wrong." That evening, Sarah reviewed her performance from the day. She had proven to herself and others that she could meet the basic physical and technical requirements. But she knew that the real test would come when she had to work closely with these men under high-pressure conditions. She thought about Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's words about teamwork and mutual support. In her previous assignments, she had often worked independently or in small groups where everyone knew their specific role. This training would require a different kind of collaboration. Sarah spent time researching the backgrounds of her fellow trainees. Most had years of special operations experience. They had worked together before and trusted each other's capabilities. She would need to earn that same level of trust through consistent performance and reliable support for her teammates. She also thought about the physical challenges ahead. Today had pushed her limits, but she had managed to complete everything within acceptable standards. However, she knew that the training would become progressively more demanding. She would need to continue improving her strength and endurance while maintaining her technical skills. Most importantly, Sarah realized that her success would depend on more than just individual performance. She would need to prove that she could be trusted to perform her role when her teammates' safety and mission success depended on her actions. The next morning would bring new challenges and the beginning of team-based training. Sarah felt ready to take the next step in discovering what she was truly capable of achieving. 2 weeks into training, Sarah Martinez found herself crouched behind a concrete barrier at 3 a.m, rain soaking through her tactical gear. Her team was pinned down in what the instructors called a simulated hostile environment, but the stress, exhaustion, and pressure felt completely real. The mission had started 18 hours earlier with what seemed like a straightforward objective: infiltrate a mock urban area, locate and extract 2 intelligence assets, and exfiltrate without detection.
What they discovered was a scenario designed to test every skill they had developed and push them past their breaking point. Sarah's team consisted of herself, Murphy, a demolitions expert named Rodriguez, and a communications specialist called Torres. Over the past 2 weeks, they had learned to work together through increasingly complex exercises. More importantly, they had learned to trust each other. That trust had developed slowly. During the first week, her teammates had been polite but cautious. They completed assigned tasks together but did not rely on her for anything critical. Sarah understood their hesitation. They had worked with proven operators for years. She was an unknown quantity. The turning point came during a night navigation exercise in the second week. Teams were required to move through dense woods to reach an objective 12 miles away. Navigation had to be done without GPS, using only maps, compasses, and natural landmarks. Halfway through the exercise, Torres injured his ankle stepping into a hidden hole. The team faced a choice: leave him behind and continue to the objective, or find a way to bring him along and risk missing the time deadline. Without hesitation, Sarah suggested a solution. She had noticed a logging road on the map that ran parallel to their intended route. If they could safely move Torres to that road, he could provide overwatch and communication support while the rest of the team completed the tactical approach to the objective. That adds 2 miles to our route, Murphy pointed out. We're already pushing the time limit. But it keeps us together as a complete team, Sarah replied. And Torres can coordinate with other teams from his position on the road. We might gain more advantage than we lose. They implemented her plan. Torres established an overwatch position that allowed him to spot obstacles and security positions that the approaching team could not see. His intelligence guided them around 2 ambush positions that would have compromised their mission. They not only reached their objective on time but performed better than any other team that night. More importantly, Sarah had demonstrated something her teammates needed to see: her first priority was team success, not individual achievement. The relationship between Sarah and her teammates changed after that exercise. They began including her in tactical planning discussions. They asked for her input on problems that required creative solutions. Most importantly, they began trusting her with responsibilities that affected everyone's safety. Now, crouched behind the barrier in the rain, Sarah faced the biggest test of that trust. Their extraction mission had gone wrong when they discovered that the intelligence assets they were supposed to rescue were actually part of an elaborate trap. Enemy forces had surrounded their position, and conventional escape routes were blocked. "We need options," Murphy said into his radio, speaking to Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, who was monitoring the exercise from a command post half a mile away. The response crackled through their earpieces: "No outside support available. Resolve with available resources or abort mission." Rodriguez checked his demolition supplies. "I can create a distraction on the east side, but it won't give us much time to move." Torres studied his electronic monitoring equipment. "Enemy communications suggest they expect us to try breaking out toward the vehicles. They have that route covered with additional forces." Sarah looked at her map and thought about their situation. They were trapped in a building complex surrounded by simulated enemy forces. Conventional tactics suggested either fighting their way out or calling for extraction support. But neither option was available. "What about going up instead of out?" she suggested. "Up where?" Murphy asked. Sarah pointed to a tall communications tower visible about 300 yards from their position. "If we can reach that tower, we have clear line of sight to call for extraction from the far side. The enemy is focused on ground-level approaches. They might not expect a vertical escape route. That tower is completely exposed," Torres pointed out. "We'd be visible to everyone once we started climbing." "Not if we move at the right time," Sarah said. She had been watching the pattern of searchlights and patrol movements for the past hour. They run a sweep pattern every 12 minutes. There's a gap in coverage that lasts about 90 seconds. If we time it right, we can reach the base of the tower without being seen." Murphy studied the tower through his binoculars. It's about 60 feet high. Metal framework construction. climbable, but challenging in this weather.
I can handle the climb, Sarah said.
I'll go up, establish communications, and guide an extraction to the far side while you provide security at the base.
Rodriguez shook his head. Too risky.
If you fall or get spotted, we lose communications and our escape route.
If we stay here, we definitely get captured when they bring in more forces, Sarah replied. This gives us a chance. Murphy was quiet for a long moment, weighing their options. Sarah knew he was making a decision that would affect everyone's safety.
She also knew he was deciding whether to trust her with the most critical part of their escape plan.
Torres, how long do we have before enemy reinforcements arrive?
Based on radio traffic, maybe 20 minutes.
Murphy made his decision. We try the tower.
Rodriguez, you set up covering fire positions here. Torres, monitor communications and track enemy movement patterns. Martinez, you have 90 seconds to reach that tower and start climbing.
Sarah checked her gear one final time.
Radio, climbing equipment, and minimal weapons load to reduce weight during the climb. She felt nervous but focused. This was exactly the kind of challenge she had trained for her entire military career.
Movement starts in 30 seconds, Murphy announced. Everyone clear on timing and responsibilities? They confirmed understanding and prepared for movement.
Sarah positioned herself at the edge of their concealment, watching the searchlight pattern and counting down the timing in her head.
Go!
Sarah sprinted across the open ground toward the communications tower. The rain made footing treacherous, but she maintained her pace and reached the base of the tower just as the searchlight began its return sweep. She started climbing immediately, using the metal framework as handholds and footholds. The rain made every surface slippery, but she climbed steadily upward, focusing on 3 points of contact at all times to maintain stability.
Halfway up the tower, she heard voices below.
Enemy forces had discovered their movement and were converging on the area.
Sarah climbed faster, knowing that reaching the top and establishing communications was now critical for her team's survival.
At 60 feet above ground, Sarah reached the communication platform at the top of the tower.
She could see the entire training area spread out below her.
More importantly, she had clear line of sight to the extraction zone on the far side of the complex. She activated her long-range radio and established contact with the command post.
Overwatch 1, this is Team 4. Request immediate extraction at grid reference 347 to 892.
We have enemy contact and need urgent support. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's voice came through clearly. Team 4, confirm your position and status. Sarah provided a complete situation report, including enemy positions, her team's location, and recommended extraction approach routes. From her elevated position, she could see tactical details that would be invisible from ground level.
Extraction helicopter en route. ETA 6 minutes. Can you maintain position?
Sarah looked down at her teammates, who were now engaged in a running firefight with simulated enemy forces. Training ammunition filled the air with the sound of combat, and she could see that they were outnumbered and running low on supplies.
Negative on maintaining current position. Team will move to extraction zone now.
I'll provide overwatch and communications relay from tower position. Sarah spent the next 6 minutes coordinating the most complex tactical movement of her military career. She guided her teammates through enemy positions, warned them of ambush locations, and directed the incoming helicopter to the safest landing approach. When the helicopter touched down, Murphy, Rodriguez, and Torres were waiting in the extraction zone. Sarah rappelled down the tower, using techniques she had learned during her initial training but had never used in such challenging conditions. She reached the ground just as enemy forces closed in on the tower location. Her team provided covering fire while she sprinted to the helicopter. All 4 team members made it safely aboard just as simulated enemy reinforcements arrived. As the helicopter lifted off, Sarah looked down at the training complex that had tested every skill and challenged every assumption she had about her own capabilities. She felt exhausted, exhilarated, and fundamentally changed by the experience. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's voice came through their headsets. Outstanding performance, Team 4. Textbook adaptation to changing tactical situation. Mission success through creative problem solving and flawless execution under pressure. Back at the base, during the exercise debrief, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell addressed the entire training group.
Tonight's scenario was designed to test your ability to adapt when standard procedures fail.
One team demonstrated exactly what we're looking for in special operations personnel.
He turned to Sarah's team. Martinez, walk us through your decision-making process on the tower approach.
Sarah explained her analysis of the tactical situation, the reasoning behind the vertical escape route, and the coordination required to make it work. As she spoke, she noticed that her fellow trainees were listening carefully, treating her words as valuable tactical instruction rather than curiosity about how a woman had performed.
The key insight, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell said, was recognizing that unconventional problems sometimes require unconventional solutions.
Martinez identified an approach that her teammates had not considered, and, more importantly, she presented it in a way that allowed rapid team decision-making.
After the debrief, Murphy approached Sarah privately. That was solid tactical thinking tonight. I wanted you to know that. Thanks. I couldn't have done it without everyone's support.
That's the point, Murphy said.
None of us could have done it alone.
But, working together, we handled something that should have been impossible.
He paused.
I owe you an apology for my initial assumptions.
You've proven you belong here.
Sarah appreciated his words, but she had learned something more important over the past 3 weeks. She had not been trying to prove that women could succeed in special operations training. She had been trying to discover what she personally was capable of achieving. The difference was significant. Instead of representing her gender, she had simply been herself, a sailor with specific skills, training, and determination. Her teammates had learned to trust her not because she was a woman who could keep up with men, but because she was a competent operator who could be counted on when missions became difficult. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah had walked into a briefing room wondering if she belonged there. Now, she knew without question that she belonged anywhere her skills and dedication could contribute to mission success.
Lieutenant Commander Mitchell pulled her aside after the other trainees had departed. Your performance over these 3 weeks has been exceptional. Not just tonight, but throughout the entire training cycle.
Thank you, sir. This has been the most challenging and rewarding experience of my military career.
I have a question for you. Would you be interested in additional training opportunities? Advanced programs that would prepare you for operational assignments rather than just training exercises?
Sarah felt her heart race with excitement and nervousness.
Absolutely, sir. Good.
Because based on what I've observed, you have the potential to succeed in roles that have never been available to women before.
It won't be easy.
The scrutiny will be intense, the standards will be demanding, and you'll constantly be proving yourself to people who have preconceived notions.
Sarah thought about everything she had learned about herself over the past 3 weeks.
She had discovered reserves of physical and mental toughness she had not known she possessed. She had learned to work effectively with elite operators under extreme pressure. Most importantly, she had learned to trust her own judgment and capabilities even when others questioned them.
I'm ready for whatever comes next, sir. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell smiled. I believe you are. Welcome to the next phase of your career, Martinez.
As Sarah walked across the base that night, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 weeks ago, she had been an intelligence specialist with potential. Tonight, she was an operator with proven capabilities and unlimited future opportunities. The rain had stopped, and stars were visible in the clear night sky. Sarah looked up at them and thought about the conversation with Commander Hayes that had started this entire experience. Hayes had asked if she was interested in challenges that other people thought were impossible.
Now Sarah knew the answer.
She was not just interested in impossible challenges. She was ready to redefine what was possible.